One of the problems sometimes with Saoirse Ronan is that Saoirse Ronan has kind of become Meryl Streep. You are so used to her being brilliant that you don't notice. Do you know what I mean? It's just like, well, here comes Saoirse Ronan, and her accent will be perfect, and her presentation will be perfect, and she will embody the character perfectly. So it's almost like you don't notice. So let's begin by saying she is just really, really great. And Margot Robbie, who came on the show to talk, was it I, Tonya, when she was talking about...
she did I, Tonya, and she did the Christopher Robin films.
So that's right, yeah, exactly. And in a way, Margot Robbie's role is arguably more difficult because her character is much more unsympathetic and is much more kind of, sidelined, whereas into this comes Mary Queen of Scots. And so much of the film is about dualities. It's about England, Scotland. It's about Protestant Catholic. It's about men and women, as you say at the end. Could the problems have been solved by simply taking the men out of the equation? And but William on Script absolutely plays that to a T. I mean, it was I struggle to remember the last time I came out of a film so much thinking of individual lines. I mean, there is the moment when Elizabeth says, I am more man than woman now, the throne has made me so. There is the moment when Mary says, I shall be the woman that she is not. I shall produce an heir unlike her barren self. There is the moment in which Elizabeth says, God wants us to be a mother and a wife. I have to say that it is absolutely full of that stuff. So it's a very fine script to work with, and it kind of melds together the personal and political intrigues and does it very well. The director, Josie Rourke, obviously has a theatrical background, and what often happens if you come to cinema from theatre, they are very, very different registers. And I actually thought this was a very cinematic movie. I mean, I felt from the beginning the way in which it contrasts landscapes and imprisoned interiors. I mean, there are moments when we see people on horseback marching up great cliffs, and it sounds like the score is coming out of the landscape. And then when we're in the interiors, no matter how lavish they may be, they feel imprisoning. It's a film which begins and ends with an image of a candle being snuffed out, and of course it also begins at the end. Saoirse Ronan says we begin with Mary arriving. Actually, before that, there's a preliminary of which intercuts Mary and Elizabeth walking to two very, very different platforms. It's also a film in which the colour scheme is very specifically coded. The colour red has a particular meaning and becomes a particularly defiant colour, whether it's the colour of a dress or the colour of hair or of blood dripping into a palette. This has all been sort of thought through very much. My only reservation in terms of theatricality was the scene that you mentioned there, in which there is this imagined meeting. It takes place in this kind of remote cottage where there are sheets.
It's like a laundry.
It's not a laundry, but it's like a laundry, yeah, in which there are sheets hanging everywhere. And the conceit is that they haven't seen each other. And of course, it's to do with they're close, but they're distant. All the way through, there's this referring to each other as sister or sisters. I'm not your sister, you're my sister, she's your cousin, all that stuff. And then suddenly this is brought together in this one scene, which she was talking about there. And they're sort of having a conversation, but they're divided by sheets. And I felt that was the one moment when I thought, okay, I could understand this working on stage, but a part of me is shouting, just take the sheets away.
Yeah, too many sheets.
Too many sheets.
At the risk of being Emperor Franz Joseph,
right.
Who was probably related to them in some way.
Yeah, too many sheets, Your Majesty.
Just lose a few sheets.
But interestingly enough, if you can pinpoint that about one scene, if I can say that's the one scene in which I felt that what we were doing was more in the realm of theatre than in the realm of cinema, excuse me, I think that says a lot about how cinematic the rest of it was, how much the rest of it felt like this was a really accomplished feature. There is a terrific supporting cast. David Tennant, as unrecognisable as he is remarkable, and he does have one of the best lines in which he declares Queen's strumpet.
Yeah, he's John Knox, the Protestant Church of Scotland.
How much more John Knox could he be? None more John Knox.
How much more facial hair could he be wearing? None.
But it's and also, I mean, it's all the roles right up to the very end, right up to a tiny role at the very, very end of the film, which is filled by a very, very famous, very, very famous thespian, and then Ian Hart. Now, I love Ian Hart in general because I have never seen Ian Hart give less than 100%, whether he's in the front of a scene or in the back of a scene. Ian Hart is, for me, one of those things like he's always completely in it. And Ian Hart's role in this film is very, very interesting, that he kind of comes out of the shadows, and it's a terrific ensemble performance. So although you have got these two leads, it's terrific ensemble performance. The film itself also has a very painterly quality. There are many images in it in which you kind of feel, if you freeze the frame and went, look, I remember...
I thought it was a bit... I found that distracting.
Yes, and I didn't. And I had worried a little bit, because we had talked about that, and you had said that occasionally you felt that that kind of artifice, that carefully choreographed picture was slightly distracting. But the thing that stopped it being so for me was Max Richter's score, because the score is a surging, sweeping thing that sounds like it's interesting, because it's got all these illusions in it, and sometimes you're hearing a bit of Philip Glass, and then this kind of swirling cycling thing, and then you're hearing a bit of Handel, and it's a proper full-on, full-blooded, melodramatic in the very best sense of the word score, that also I think pushes things out of the realm of the artificial into something which achieves something reaching towards transcendence.
Is it as good as this Five Live up to the hour music, would you say?
This is hard to top. I mean, this is...
Did you? We can discuss it after the news if you like. I did find it a little bit knowing and a little bit contemporary. I don't want to mention the specific points, but...
Yes, I know what you mean, but it didn't bother me. But
look at me, I'm such a liberal queen, and down there...
The fact that it didn't bother me suggests that it was working its magic, because I forgave it for all the things that I know you're talking about.